Thank you, Ingrid. I would like to start with a question, a quiz question, if you will. It's a question that I hope will stump most people. It has a surprising answer and an answer that will shed some light on my subject. The question concerns the role of scientific innovation in driving economic progress. And I'm focusing particularly on America's role in discovering the chemical elements. The chemical elements are, as you know, the discovery of them is one of the greatest achievements of science. Some elements were discovered in antiquity. Some, and many were discovered beginning about 500 years ago in Europe, basically, when scientists began a systematic search for elements and began to identify them. So I would submit that you can judge a nation's scientific record to quite an extent by how well it has done in finding elements over the centuries. So my question is this: which was the first element discovered by an American, and when was it discovered? Any answers? No. No. The correct answer is astatine, A-S-T-A-T-I-N-E, which was discovered in 1940. So as recently as that, the Americans got into the game. Before that, the elements were basically discovered by Germans, by Britons, by Italians, by French people, Russians, and so on. So the point I'm making is that the Americans are actually newcomers to the world of advanced technology. We don't think of this, but basically the Americans failed on this technological test. Even the Japanese did better. A Japanese citizen back about, I think, 1912 discovered one of the elements. So the larger point here is that America was a very successful economy from very early on, from the mid-19th century, yet it was not a very technology-driven economy. It was not driven by technological creativity in the sense in which we understand that term. So something else is going on here, and it's worth remembering that de Tocqueville, the French observer who wrote a famous book about America in the 19th century, he described America as being a nation that copied ideas from other countries and was very good at that, and was very good at adapting ideas into consumer products. And this is the view, of course, that we have today of countries like Japan. Basically we're talking about innovation and the various forms of innovation. Our idea of innovation as being very, very advanced technology, I think, is an ideological construct that is basically toxic to our understanding of how economies work. It distracts attention from the basic driver of economic progress, which is production technology. Better production technologies, incremental improvements in existing products. We've heard from Phil here, E&I's product development program is, I think, of this sort. It's incremental, basically. So anyhow, if we go back to America, America at the end of the 19th century was not a very scientific place, but it led the world in production technologies that made goods more cheaply and to better quality standards. Right across the waterfront in industry, America was a leader at that point. So production technology, of course, implies manufacturing. And we're told these days that no high-wage country can continue forever to compete in manufacturing. Manufacturing isn't migrating to China, to other low-wage countries. So high-wage countries are well advised, apparently, to move to the new economy. This is, frankly, one of the great fallacies of all economic history. And when you think about it, it should be obvious. We in Europe, we look out to Germany, and we look out to the Netherlands, Austria, Belgium, Sweden, Luxembourg even. These are all manufacturing countries. They have strong manufacturing bases. The other day we heard from Bo Lidegaard from Denmark, who told us about Danish economic methods. The Danes have a strong manufacturing base and a very strong export base based on their manufacturing. We can also look at East Asia. East Asia is full of countries that are emphasizing manufacturing. Of course, Korea, Taiwan, China, and particularly Japan. In these parts, you're told that Japan has been a failing economy for the last 20 years. That's nonsense. If you look at the things that really matter to the Japanese, they've been doing rather well. They've been one of the most successful economies in the world in the last 20 years, certainly measured against trade, manufacturing, competitiveness, and so on. They've been doing far better than, for instance, the United States, the UK, France, Italy. All these countries have been losing position in manufacturing. Perhaps we can discuss this in further detail in the Q&A session at the end. But for now, I'd like to just focus on the case for manufacturing in larger terms. For any nation that wants to lead the world in per capita income, manufacturing, I would submit, is a far better bet than the new economy. And I make 3 points for manufacturing. This is a summary of an argument I made in 1999. The first point is jobs. Manufacturing creates jobs for everyone, not jobs for an intellectual elite. Second point is wages. Manufacturing creates the potential for high wages. Relative to the skills of the workers involved, wages can be very high. Certainly in advanced nations that specialize in advanced manufacturing, this is the case. What do we mean by advanced manufacturing? We mean capital-intensive manufacturing and know-how-intensive manufacturing. We mean that workers are working with tremendously expensive, sophisticated machinery, and so they are highly productive. That means that the employer has plenty of scope to pay high wages. The workers, by the way, don't know everything. They are not necessarily very knowledgeable at all. The knowledge, there is a lot of knowledge involved, there's a lot of R&D involved, but it is in, for instance, machine settings. If you set your production machinery in a certain way, you maximize your production, you maximize the output, and you maximize the quality. Determining these settings is no easy thing. You have to learn by trial and error over maybe months, years, even decades. So once you've established this sort of know-how, it's difficult for somebody, say, in Vietnam or in Cambodia to come in and take your market away from you. They don't have the knowledge, and they will never acquire it without going through the same sort of learning by doing process that you've conducted over a very long time. Let's contrast this with the new economy. Jobs in the new economy are not capital intensive, they're labor intensive. That means that nations with low wages can compete against you and can compete to win. The second point about new economy jobs is that they tend to be not know-how intensive in terms of proprietary know-how. There is a lot of know-how involved, but it is know-how that's generally available, for instance, on the internet. If you want to learn how to produce software, you can go to the internet and download all the relevant knowledge. So again, you're vulnerable to competition from lower wage countries, and particularly in software, for instance, you have India now very strong, Russia coming along, and so on. The third point I make for manufacturing is that it creates exports. Manufacturing creates goods that are highly exportable. Typically, manufactured goods require little adaptation to sell around the world, usually perhaps no more than an instruction book in the local language concerned. By contrast, new economy products are often highly culture specific. These products need to be adapted for dozens of different cultures and languages and so on. The adaptation typically is done abroad, near the ultimate consumer. The adaptation costs cut into the home country's receipts and thereby reduce the export revenues. Before closing, I'd like to mention that I talked to Margaret O'Callaghan of Queen's University on Monday, and we discussed the decline of Northern Ireland's once superb industrial base. That decline, of course, particularly involved the virtual closure of the shipyard. And it is surely clear that the problems created by that decline, unemployment, spilled over into the Troubles and greatly, in fact, exacerbated the Troubles. You had unionist workers who were formerly gainfully employed, who were suddenly among the long-term unemployed, and had plenty of time to make mischief, basically. Margaret told me that in Belfast these days, it's regarded as inevitable that industrial decline will continue. Basically, the standard line that nations with high wages cannot compete in manufacturing. The outcome here wasn't remotely inevitable. It was frankly just terrible policy thinking in London. It was a reflection of our completely wrong-headed idea of manufacturing in the English-speaking world. I'd like to sum up for Ireland by reminding you that T.K. Whittaker in the late 1950s identified manufacturing as the royal road to national prosperity. He was right then, and frankly, his case is as strong as ever now. Thank you.